Welcome everyone to ICTICT213 Use Computer Operating System and Hardware. So when you log in to the Moodle system, you will see on your home page something similar to this. You'll see the learner guide, a PowerPoint, and a docs zip folder. Okay. And eventually you want to copy all that information onto your computer. But for now, this is just the introduction. So we'll just go through a few housekeeping items. So once you actually download all the files, you should double click Use Computer Operating System and Hardware, and whatever version number we're up to, and then Learner Guide. And the Learner Guide is for you to read and to follow the activities throughout the documents. My name's Shannon, and you can contact me. We'll have a look at how you can contact me later. But table of contents. We got unit details, what this unit's about, training plan, assessment plan, theory content, so that's where all your main content is, and some assessment documents, and some perhaps maybe the activity sheet of where there's a list of all the activities that you need to do throughout the online training course. So this is what we're going to do actually. You can either do it in the workplace or online through a simulated workplace environment, which this course is about, is online using a simulated workplace environment. What we're going to do is we use our current computer. It might be a Windows 10 computer, which we call our host computer. And then we're going to create virtualization, which simulates an actual workplace or physical computers, but we're going to do it in a simulated workplace environment. So we're going to use virtualization to simulate that workplace environment, and that's why we have two diagrams or two pictures. It says Windows VM, so we're going to install Windows virtual machine, and we're going to install a Kali Linux virtual machine. And we have a router to access the internet, so our host computer access the internet through a router, so that's a piece of hardware, so that's where the hardware component of the course comes in. And we're going to attach a printer and a network share, which is a printer is an external hardware device, and a hard disk or a network share, which is a hard disk, is an inbuilt hardware item which is connected to the host computer. So that's basically what we're going to do. We have our client host computer, which we're using now, and two virtual machines. And then within the Windows virtual machine, we're going to put Microsoft Kali Linux in, using the Windows Linux subsystem. That's just to, so we get familiarized with Windows and Kali Linux just as a beginning, issuing commands, which is the first component of the online course, or use computer operating system and hardware. And then we're going to go into installing Linux or Kali Linux in a virtual machine within itself. So we have Windows 10 virtual machine and a Kali Linux, but inside the Windows virtual machine we also have Kali Linux, but it's the Microsoft version of Kali Linux using a Linux subsystem. So when I say Windows Kali Linux, that's the one I mean. But when I say Kali Linux, it's within its own virtual machine. So the first part we're going to do be Windows with Kali Linux, and then we're going to create a new Kali Linux just by itself in its own virtual machine, which we want to install an Apache web server and Moodle, which is a content management system. So we're going to use Kali virtual machine to do that. So we're actually going to install two operating systems. Even though the unit says one, but it says you need to use a single user operating system and a multi-user operating system. And the Microsoft Kali Linux doesn't quite do everything that we need to. That's why we're installing the second operating system in here. So this is the first operating system, and this is operating system 1. This is operating system 2. And this is our host computer, the computer that's hosting the virtual machines. And the virtual machine names that we're going to use is Windows 10 Virtual Machine, which is this one. And the other one we're going to call Kali Linux Test Demo, which is this one. Okay. Unit details. So a bit more about the unit that we're going to be studying. So the unit name is ICTICT213 Use Computer Operating System and Hardware, Released 1, or version 1. Qualification, it's based on Cert 2 in Applied Digital Technologies, version 1, and it can also be found in Cert 3 Information Technology, version 1 and 2. Training packages that this unit is referenced in is ICT, Information and Communication Technologies Training Package, version 6. Now, a little description about the unit. This unit describes the skills and knowledge required to select, install, and configure and use computer operating system and its basic computer hardware. This involves configuring the operating system to work in a variety of hardware peripherals, which we already talked about, which is the router, a printer, and a hard disk, which we're going to share. And the types of information and communication technologies equipment. It applies to those who work under supervision and provide support to others. This includes individuals who apply a range of configuration skills to use and solve issues in the operating system and hardware environment. There are no licensing, legislation, or certification requirements that apply to this unit at this time. And LNN level. You need at least level 2 reading and writing. Skills. Here's a list of skills that you're going to learn. And knowledge that you're going to obtain after doing this unit. Unit outline. To deem competent, this unit must the candidate must demonstrate the ability to select, install, configure, and use computer operating system, install, configure, and run at least one application software and at least one support hardware component. It says at least one. So we're actually doing Windows and Kali Linux. So we're doing 2 operating systems. Oh, actually no, that's one application software. But we're going to go through a number of application software. But we're actually installing 2 operating systems, Linux and Kali Linux, in a virtual environment. And optimize at least one operating system using tools, drivers, and vendor utilities. This unit will cover how to identify operating system and hardware components, install and configure operating system, application software and hardware components, optimize operating system and hardware components, and seek feedback. I know it's repeated a bit itself, but that's what the unit's about. And like I said, we're going to use virtualization. So to test whether your computer can do virtualization, there's this little tool. If you click on the link or press Control and then click on the link, it will take you to the website where you can download this application and test whether your computer can handle virtualization. If you're running Windows, you can use this program. So you can go download and launch. It's just to test whether your computer can do virtualization. So that's a little resource. Okay, for training, we'll go through how to use Windows 10 client host machine with the installation, configuration, and the use of 2 operating systems in a virtual machine or virtual environment to simulate a workplace environment, and an introduction to virtualization. A printer will be attached to the host machine. A network file share will be on the Windows 10 client host machine. So this client host machine will have part of its hard disk shared over the network so Kali Linux can see. And like I said before, we're going to install an operating system. And the operating system that we're going to install as a virtualization is Windows 10. And then we're going to install Microsoft Kali Linux Windows subsystem installed on the operating system 1. And operating system 2, we're just going to install Kali Linux, and it's going to be the full installer 32-bit version of Kali Linux from Kali Linux. I think it's .org. I have to check that up. Learning will also involve basic use of CLI, which is command line interface commands, to perform the following Kali Linux commands. And there's a list of all the different commands we're going to go through. How to get help, navigate the system, investigate system hardware information, create users and groups, create files, folders, set up change permissions, edit a file using the program Nano, or you can use VI. I like Nano, so we're going to go through Nano. Download packages that are not installed using apt-get, or from a third-party source we might use Git. Start and stop services, and we might have a look at how to use SSH and how to remote desktop using XFCE, mount and unmount a file system, which is a network share. Have a look how to use tar or a zip file, or how to extract files from a zip file and compress files. And we're going to have a look how to install Apache Web Server, which by default sometimes, well, in Kali Linux it's already installed, but maybe perhaps how to start and stop it. Configure a content management system, which is Moodle, and how to install MariaDB or an SQL database to use Moodle. And as we go through and testing and issuing commands, we're going to come up with some errors as we go. Maybe a command that we issue isn't installed, so that's an error. We need to install that program. So that's an error. So we might actually, to solve that error, we might install the application. So that's handling errors. So if something doesn't work, issue a command. So we might investigate how to fix that error. And we're going to install and configure and run at least one application software and at least one supporting hardware component like a printer. Identify and install suitable hardware components, like I said, a printer. And optimize at least one operating system using tools, drivers, and vendor utilities. So we're going to maybe perhaps optimize 2 computer systems or 2 operating systems. So that's the training component part of it, which can be all done through online using virtualization. Or you can do all those tasks in the workplace. And to do all those tasks in the workplace, you should see your workplace supervisor to aid you in developing the skills. However, all these skills, all these activities can be followed in the workplace. So you should see a activities list. So when you downloaded all your zip file, when you opened up your learner guide on Moodle, you have your learner guide, the PowerPoint, and a docs folder, or a docs zip file, which contains all the docs folder. So you would download all that, double click it, and then you might just extract it or copy it, and then right click paste, and it will paste a folder called docs, and in docs you have all the additional documents and activities that are outlined in your learner guide. And in this case, we're looking at workplace training. So we were looking at the activities list. So we should have an activities list somewhere in here. There you go. 000 ICT213 activity sheet. So if I open that, activity sheet. So RTO or sole trader, this is me. Date activities performed. So you can put maybe the start date, and you can put as you go along each date you do an activity. Your name, configuration, because doing all activity is part of an assessment. If you're going down the assessment route, but if you're doing this just online, just for learning, I suggest you follow this as well. So just put name, and you should be issued a student number. Put your name and perhaps email address. And if you want, you can sign this for the assessment. And then it outlines assessor and candidate instruction. So it gives you instructions what you need to do. We're going to install 2 operating systems, and this is what the activity list is. And this diagram shows you by the end of the activities assessment, you will have created the following computer operating system environment, which is a virtual environment. Duration, you can either do it within 3 hours, or if you need more time, you can do it over 12 weeks or 3 months. But you also need to do the video recordings. So you might use the Windows Game Bar or OBS recording. The resources that you require for the activities, we'll go through that later. But this is just a sample. So the first part of the activity is a practical. So these are all the practical activities and activities list that you should follow, which all these activities are in the learner guide. But this is just a summary of all the activities as an activity sheet that you can follow. So the first activity, install an operating system. It says see document activities -2, how to create Windows 10 VirtualBox on your Windows computer. So if you go back to our File Explorer activities list, and you'll see activity -2.0. You don't actually need that one. That's the old version. I might delete that one. But when you get the new one, that won't be in there. So that's how to create a Windows 10 VirtualBox on your Windows 10 Windows computer. It says see document. So that's the instructions that you need to follow to set up this workplace virtual environment. So download Windows 10. So that's the link to download and all the steps that you need to follow along with all the activities. So you can follow all that, and that's to set up a virtual machine and installing Windows 10. And by the end of it, you'll see something like this. Windows 10 in a virtual machine. So you have your client computer and the virtual machine. And then eventually, so that's the first one. Where are we? Activity 2. And you need to record that. And then the next one is Activity 0. Windows 10 install Kali Linux from the Microsoft Store. And that's the instructions. Was it 0.0? And you don't need that one from the Microsoft Store. Delete, yes. We want version 2.1. So we've already installed Windows 10 at the beginning. And that will go through how to install Kali Linux from the Microsoft Store. All the steps you need to follow. And there's other videos that you can watch to do this activity as well. So all these activities have mostly videos. Okay, so that was just the introduction about the activity sheet and where you can find all your activities. Okay, back to the training section, to our learner guide. Purpose of this unit. The purpose of this unit is to give users an introduction, understanding of Linux operating system and the command line interface to issue commands, in the foresight for further studies in perhaps app development or network security. Just basically so you get an understanding for new technologies. Duration of the unit. The nominal training hours is 60 hours, not just 20 hours. There's actually a lot involved, which is taken from the Victorian Purchasing Guide. Duration says 60 hours, which can be, and this program is designed to be done over 12 weeks or within 10 weeks, 10 weeks of study and 2 weeks for assessment or assessment throughout the course of the length. And the total time for this course allowed is 3 months. And actual push hours or contact training hours with perhaps me online if need be is 45 contact hours, or in the workplace with your supervisor going through all the activities and helping you out. So glossary of terms. You could probably read that. Assessment tool. Assessment tool is what the assessor fills in. And the assessment instrument is what are the instructions that the student must follow to demonstrate his skills and knowledge, which is basically all the activities in the activity list. And we have different types of assessment: formative, summative, and supplementary. And some of the assessment tools are activities, which I quickly showed you the activities, and which demonstrates a practical skill, and the quiz questions, which demonstrates the knowledge. And if you do it in the workplace, you might do a project or a third party, which is your supervisor, which you might get to do a job log, and your supervisor in the workplace has to sign off on all the jobs that you perform in the workplace. So that's a third party assessment tool. To deem competent. So having suitable or sufficient skills and knowledge and experience. Example, etc. actually. Okay, assessment. Competence and assessment information. What's it say? To be assessed as competent, participant must provide evidence of knowledge and skills relative to this unit of competency. So doing all the activities practical, that demonstrates a skill, and doing the quiz question demonstrates knowledge. So if you have those two parts of assessment, you should be deemed by the end competent. However, you satisfactorily have to complete both those components to being deemed as competent in this unit. And if you have any special needs in training or assessment, let your trainer know. So when it comes to assessment, we can have all the equipment and setup, and extra time can be negotiated. And complaints or appeals, you can just send it to the online training facilitator or the RTO or the person that you enrolled into the course's email address. And always, complaints or appeals must be written in email and written, perhaps typed up as an email to the company or the training provider. Critical aspects of evidence, we kind of shortly already did that, but this is just in more detail. So we're going to select, install, and configure and use an operating system. So as part of critical aspects of evidence, if you're doing it in the workplace, you need a project assessment task sheet, which in the docs folder, we have the project assessment task sheet. So we have the project assessment task sheet. And then we have, in the workplace, it's slightly different. You have a Windows computer and you have a printer and the hard disk shared to the client host computer with a router, and then you have Kali Linux on a different computer. So these two are actually two different computers connected via a router, which might be connected to the internet. That's the difference between the workplace environment and the virtual environment. And scenario 1 has an outline of what to do and all the tasks. And that's what you need to submit for the workplace assessment task project. And an assessment checklist, which the trainer will sign off. I'm not sure we have the assessment checklist. Training plan, assessment checklist. And that might be assessment checklist that the trainer will mark you off on. And there you go. I think that's the assessment checklist. And that's the workplace version of it. That's what needs to be submitted, all the documents. And yes, there you go. So part 1, that's the project. So that's the workplace. If you're not doing it in the workplace, those are the activities. And you need to provide video. So this is the assessment checklist that the assessor will go through and mark you off on, which is a really long list, which can be done over a period of time. So you must be competent or satisfactory in all areas before you become competent. So that's why there's 2 satisfactory. And you can have multiple dates. And you sign, or the trainer signs, whether you're competent or not yet competent. And it can be done over a period of time. So you can have multiple dates in here. And you just need to sign that the work that you've done and shown and demonstrated is your own work. So that's the assessment checklist, or in the workplace. And the document, so those are the documents. And then as part of the project assessment in the workplace, you need to demonstrate videos or a job log of the video recording or video recording of the tasks that you perform in the workplace. If you're doing it in a simulated or online, you would follow the activities list. And you also need to record the videos activity list, which I already told you about, which is the activity sheet, which outlines the list of all the activities. And there's an activity checklist, and that is the same one that I showed you before, CHK, which is the checklist. And you need to, whether regardless you're doing it in the workplace or online in a simulated environment, you still need to do the quiz assessment, which is, where do we have? Quiz assessment sheet. So you have the instructions. You can either do it online or print this out and just simply answer the questions. Circle which choice best describes the answer to the following question. What is an operating system? And you just have to circle which one best suits an operating system, which might be number one. An operating system is what allows you to interact with software and hardware components of your device or computer. An operating system is not hardware. An operating system is an application that allows you to run with your device. Actually, it's A. An operating system is what allows you to interact with software and hardware. So the answer is A. So you just circle A. So that's the first free question. But that's the quiz assessment. Okay, moving on. Method of assessment. You have simulated. So you next demonstrate activities or simulated or in the workplace. And you both have to submit a quiz question. You have a list of practical tasks, which we're already kind of gone through. And we have a list of resources required. And for online self-paced and training, this is what you need. And in the workplace, this is some of the equipment that you need in the workplace. And you have a list of web resources. And you have links to where you can download like the virtualization software. Where you can download some more information about Kali Linux, Windows 10, a YouTube video, Linux subsystem on Windows 10, licensing agreement, none, training documentation and assessment. All relevant documents for training activities and assessments can be found in the Unit's Competency Docs folder, in which you can download. An example is Activity 0, which already showed you that. So when you when you download the material, you have a docs zip file. You just double click, copy, then go back to your folder and then paste. And then it will come up with a list of all the documents. So those are additional activities that you need to do. Training documents and assessment. Training plan. If you're doing this formally, there's a training plan, and it's a sample training plan. Trainer details, which is me, which is your online facilitator. My name's Shannon So. If you want any assistance, you can email me at soe_0@hotmail.com. And it tells you the unit information, which we've already gone through. And I'll let you read that. Assessment plan. Before you're doing any training and assessment, you need to fill out a training and assessment plan. So in Docs, we actually have an assessment plan and a training plan. We'll just have a look at the assessment plan first. So before you start the course, you might read through all this, and it outlines the assessment that needs to be performed and negotiated with your trainer, or assessment, sorry, the assessor. and when you're going to do the assessment, when you're ready to do the assessment. So that's the assessment plan that can be negotiated with your assessor. And then we also have a training plan. So this is for you to keep you on track. And these are all the learning outcomes and objectives, which is basically we kind of quickly went through. And the order of study of items that you should need to do. But if you go through the assessment activities checklist, or it should be all done within this order anyway. So the first part is to install activity negative 2.0, which is study order 0. So that's the first activity you should do. Then the second activity you should do is install in Windows 10, install Kali Linux from the Microsoft Store. And you should see that document to find the instructions on how to do it. So that's your online or structure and sequence of learning. So we have 0, 1, and then we have number 3. So we might just do some reading on that, but don't do the activities yet. If we go down to install and configure, it says number 1. So look in the list to make sure you do all the numbers listed in order before you go into the next order of study. So element 2, install and configure operating system, application software and hardware components, which is the first 2 parts. And then we see number 2. Number 2 is element 2.4. Use graphical user interface and command line interface and perform basic tasks according to task requirements. And these are some of the tasks. How to start Windows 10 DOS command line interface. How to start Kali Linux Windows 10 using Linux subsystem. So that's the order of study. So that's our training plan. Where are we? Structure, sequence, and structure of learning. Theory content. So that's just a general introduction and outline of everything. So we'll stop the video there. So it's about 40 minutes. So we'll just pause the video here and come back just for a short introduction about the actual unit and where to go from there. So that's it for now. I'll see you in the next video.